Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video, and today, there's no secret that the producer community is becoming oversaturated. Feels like every second day, a new person comes on the scene. Kids can now pick up any DAW and just start working. There is so much free stuff out there, so many free resources, and it's becoming more and more important to make good stuff that stands out. Now, this is something I've been working on the past couple of days, especially just making stuff that's a little bit unique, a little bit left field, but it's still not too far out of where we're used to being comfortable, and so that it still makes sense. And I think this loop I'm about to break down here does this very well. So without further ado, let's get into FL Studio and I'll show you how I made it. Alright, so for this breakdown, we're just going to be focusing on these top instruments. Now, it looks like there's a lot going on, but a lot of this is just like background noise and ear candy for the most part. The main sound in this sample is the bass. Now, this sub bass slash growl is very dubstep inspired. I actually got it from a dubstep sample pack, which makes sense why it sounds dubstep. But yeah, this is from the oversampled free sound chest sample pack. A lot of these sounds are actually free, so if you want them for yourself, feel free to go on the interwebs and check it out. This is the sound chest disguised bass one shot. Sounds super grimy, really dirty, and it's not a very common sound that you hear in trap a lot. So I think that was a really great sound to start with. Now, you can do this either way. You can start with where you're comfortable, whether it be a piano, guitar, strings, a choir, whatever you like using, and then you can add the unique sound on top, or you can start with the unique sound and build on top of it. It's really up to you. But for effects, I put an EQ rolling off some of the high end because I really wanted to emphasize the bass, the sub, and the low mid frequencies, especially on this one. I boosted at 56 hertz quite heavily because that's where the fundamental frequency was, and I wanted to boost that a lot to give it a lot of body. And I also brought this low shelf up a tad just to boost the overall low end of the sound. And now I've done this quite a lot, and you should try this out for yourself. I like the sound of hard clipping on some of my bass sounds. So what I do is I boot up Fruity Limiter, I turn the attack, release, and sustain down to 0. And then I just turn the ceiling down so that it crushes the sound and gets that nice distorted sound. And this is probably the biggest thing that changes the sound the most. I put a half beat gate on this, and that stutter effect is really what gives this sound its uniqueness. I think it sounds super fire. If you're worried about things sounding really boring and mundane, try throwing a gate or a tremolator or something like that on top. It can really switch up the vibe without doing too much. So I've just drawn out this pattern. It's very simple. I work a lot in A minor to begin with because obviously it's all the white keys and it's very easy to play out on a MIDI keyboard if you're not very good like me. So this is just playing the root note and then it goes up to the third. And yeah, with all the effects and this pattern, it sounds like this. Very simple. Now, the second unique thing I guess I did is I layered it with another sub bass. Now, layering sub frequencies and bass frequencies is a pretty big no-no unless you sidechain them, and that's exactly what I did. So I got this industry bass one-shot from Busyworks Beats free one-shot kit. You probably heard this on a lot of beats in trap, and I use a bass in Serum that's very similar to this. It sounds like this. Just a couple of things. I've got the first EQ that's just boosting some of the low bass sub frequencies. And then the most important thing, I've opened up another EQ with a brick wall filter, or not necessarily a brick wall, but like a high pass filter that we can automate. But in this case, we're not actually automating. We've opened up a Fruity Peak controller on the first bass one shot that I showed you. And I've linked this to this frequency, which you can see when I move this, it turns this dial. So you can right click here, go link to controller, and then you go to internal controller, and you might have a bunch here depending on if it's a new project or not. But make sure you go peak control peak, which I have here. You can go inverted or default. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. You just will have to have slightly different settings on the peak controller here. So bass is obviously going to change where the filter starts. Volume is going to change how much it actually comes up by when the filter is triggered. Tension is kind of hard to explain. I don't know exactly, but what I think it does is I think it kind of smooths out the signal. Because what this does is it basically monitors like the volume level of the one shot. And a lot of sounds don't have a very smooth volume envelope, if that makes sense. It can jump around a lot. So what I think this tension does is sort of smooths out that signal. So this is without any tension. You can see it's not very smooth and it's not going up very fast. So if I increase this tension, it jumps up a little bit further. It's hard to explain, but just play around with the parameter until you get what you're looking for. And then this decay is obviously a decay knob. If you play with this, it will affect how slowly the peak control lasts. So when you get an input, it will just delay the time for the value, whatever the value it got was. It would just stretch out the time it will take for the value that was inputted to go back to 0. So if I turn this decay down really low, or really high, sorry, this is sort of inverted. You can see this will take a long time to close the filter. Which doesn't really sound very good for this case because I've got a sub bass. I want this to open back up as soon as the other one shot stops playing. So I'm gonna put this back to 100% and you can see it moves much faster and has a much tighter hold on the filter. And you can do this to sidechain your kick to your 808 as well. There's a lot of different applications. I like doing this for cutting certain frequencies out of another sound as well, because you can link this to pretty much any parameter within FL Studio. So this is a bunch of applications that you should definitely try out. But that's the most unique sound in this sample. From here, we've got a decent sampler. I've just used a claustrophobic piano bank. This is a free sampler. I made a video on it not too long ago. If you want to go check that out, I'll leave a card in the top right. But this piano in particular sounds really good, really intimate. And I've just got it playing some of the bass notes as well. And because we have a lot of bass and low mid frequencies, you got to make sure that they're not interfering with each other. In this case, the piano's turned down a little bit, but you can still hear it. So in context, it sounds like this. Now, it's not perfect. It's a little bit muddy, but I think in this case, this really dark, grungy bass, it sort of fits the vibe, if that makes sense. Now, usually you don't want any mud at all, but in this particular case, I think it sounds pretty good. Obviously, this is completely subjective, but the slight amount of dissonance that happens here at the end of the phrase, I think adds to the dark atmosphere of the whole sample. The next sound that's in the foreground is just this violin. I've got the Violins 1 in BBC Symphony Orchestra. This is a free orchestra plugin. And this is a very simple pattern. It's playing exclusively A and A sharp notes. If you were listening before, or if you know minor scales, A minor is all the white notes, which is the same as C major. A sharp isn't in the scale. Now, I know a little bit about music theory, but I don't know a lot, which means I don't know exactly why this A sharp works, but it's what I heard and it's where I wanted the melody to go. So I just put it in, I played it. It sounds good to me. If you understand music theory more than me and you can explain how this works, feel free to let me know because I'd love to know. With all the other sounds, it sounds like this. Super dark. I feel like this sample can be flipped into either drill or trap. Anyway, moving on to effects. I haven't got any effects specifically on the instrument bus. However, I've got a send to Valhalla Supermassive. I got the 60% of Infinity preset, and I've just dialed down the feedback and the delay a little bit. And I've also bring the low cutoff frequency up to about 500 hertz. And then I've also got Little Alter Boy to pitch up the reverb by an octave. And I think that sounds really tense and it sounds great, in my humble opinion, of course. The next sound you'll probably notice, and I've used this a lot before, is also in this BBC Symphony Orchestra. You go into percussion and then untuned percussion. And then the F on this higher octave is this little stick hit sound. I don't know how to explain it. And I think it sounds super ethnic, super dark. And I love the reverb that I've put on this as well. Just put a really wide, really wet reverb. Make it sound like it's in a really big room or cave even. And I've just played this in completely manually, didn't quantize it at all. I think it gives it this really organic feel. And again, adds to the atmosphere. I really like how it sounds. So with all the previous sounds, this one sounds like this. Alright, those are the main sounds. Let's move on to the little ear candy sounds. Now, I've used 3 different sounds for this. The first one we'll go over is this one shot from a free Unison one shot pack. Sounds like this. Little bell slide type sound. It's also playing a very, very simple pattern, just hitting on A. Notice though, a lot of these sounds, even though they're playing all the same notes, are still occupying different frequency ranges. For instance, the violin's quite high, this sound is quite high, the sub bass is obviously quite low. So everything has its own space. I'm not just layering sound on sound that occupy the same frequency range. And if I do, it's for a very deliberate reason. Either it's for the reverb tail that it has or a certain tone that it has. Everything has a point. This again has quite a large reverb. The decay time is fairly high, and I've increased the stereo separation a little bit and upped the room size to 100, of course. And that's about all that's important for that. And in context, it sounds like this. I've turned it down pretty quiet in the mix. You probably wouldn't notice it if I didn't point it out. Maybe you would. But yeah, the next 2 are from Flex. Both of these from Arcs and Cityscape. This preset's called Haunting Hour. Again, just playing A. Every second one is up an octave, however, just for a little bit of variation. This one's turned quite down low in the mix as well, so it'll be more felt than heard. And I'm just going to bundle this in with the next one. It's in the same bank, and it's called Quantum Dust. This one's playing the same pattern, except this low A has been pitched up to an E. So the previous pattern was like this with the shorter note length, and I've just pitched this up to the E, which is a 5th of A. And usually stacking 5ths on top of the root note sound pretty good. And for effects on this one, I've just got an EQ band, really isolating a specific frequency. And between these last 2 ones, I painted the Haunting Hour one left and this one right because they're pretty similar sounds. They occupy a similar frequency range, as I've mentioned before. But a way to have them both in and to fit them in the mix is to pan them either side to give it a really wide sounding atmosphere. Now, every sound in this loop, except the sub basses and that little stick hit, are all routed to a bus, which has this frequency band, cutting out the low end so it doesn't clash and doesn't mud up the sub frequencies any more that they already are. Has this really wide, lush reverb with the wet level. Pretty much, it's at 125%, so it's a lot of reverb. And I've got a very light tremolator MIDI on 1/16 notes. But I've turned the mix level down to 14%, so it's barely noticeable. And yeah, that's all the sounds. Altogether, it sounds like this. Alright, that's a super sick sample breakdown. It's probably one of my favorite samples to date. If you learn anything, let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content, hit the bell notification video for next time I post a video. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, drink water, eat good food, get lots of sleep, and yeah, take it easy. I'll see you guys in the next video. As always, I love you.